big pond, in a big park, in a big city, there lived lots and lots of frogs. And every evening the frogs liked nothing better than to sit by the water's edge, talking about this and that and having a good old croak. But one evening, they heard a terrible noise coming from the middle of the pond. "That's just awful," said the frogs. "What is it? What is it?" They all turned to see a tiny frog in the middle of the pond. And the tiny frog was singing. "What are you doing?" said all the other frogs at once. "I'm singing," said the tiny frog, and he sang again. "La la la la, la la la."
No, no, no singing, said the biggest frog. We only croak here. Can't you croak?
But the tiny frog couldn't croak. All he could do was sing, so he sang again. La 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 la. This made the frogs even more furious.
"That's it," said the biggest frog. "I've had it with him. He's gotta go."
And all the other frogs agreed. "He's gotta go," they all said. "He's gotta go." And that's how it was. The tiny frog turned his back on the pond he had always lived in and headed across the great park to find a life elsewhere. 3 hours later, he was still walking. "There's a lot of grass in the park," said the tiny frog. "It goes on forever." And just as he said that, the grass disappeared, and the frog found himself standing on the side of a long, long road. The tiny frog's wide mouth fell open in amazement as he watched all the traffic zoom by. He tried singing again, la 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 la, but it was no good. The tiny voice of the tiny frog was swallowed up in all the noise around him. "Better keep going," the tiny frog said to himself. "I've got to find another pond before nighttime." Then he felt 1 drop, and then 2 drops. Then 3 drops of rain land on the tip of his nose. "Here it comes," he said to himself. And the water got deeper and deeper so that soon the little frog wasn't walking. He was paddling, and then he wasn't paddling. He was swimming, and then he found his pond. Outside a large, important-looking building, the rain had made a huge, huge puddle. It ran all over the pavement and out onto the road, so that whenever a car went through, anyone passing by got really soaked. "And this," thought the frog happily, "will be my new home." And he began to sing once again. La 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 la, la 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 la. Up and up the tiny frog's little tune rose between the big city buildings and headed for a little patch of starlit sky 1,000,000 miles above him. Up and up and up until it floated through the window of a huge room where a huge man sat behind a huge desk.
"Listen to that voice,"
said the huge man, and he rushed to the window and stuck out his head to listen some more. La 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 la, sang the frog from way down below. "I want that voice for my next show," said the huge man. "I need that voice for my next show. Get me that voice." Many weeks later, back in the park, all the other frogs were gathered around a scrap of paper that had blown out of one of the trash cans. There on the front page was a photo of the tiny frog.
"It's him," said the biggest frog of all. "What's he doing in the paper?"
the other frogs said. But of course, none of the frogs could read. And if they had been able to read, the frogs would have seen that the headline read,
"Frog sings in the president."
So they never knew that the tiny frog went on to become the most famous singing frog